Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Honestly, Let's Talk. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each Thursday night, I look to bring you another episode with a variety of topics and conversations. If you've been following this series for the last couple of months, you know that a couple of months ago, we did an episode called Authors, and I brought on some authors that I loved and admired and respected, and it was such a cool conversation for me that I wanted to bring on 5 more. And when I thought of the other 5 authors, I was so excited when all 5 of them said yes, and I got the 5 I wanted. And so tonight we're going to be talking about being an author, writing a book, all that kind of stuff. Just to have a little distraction from the crazy going on in our world, we're going to talk about something different. And we're probably going to bring in some of the current events too, but I don't want to be talking too much. I want you to meet my fantastic panel today. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell you who they are, where they are from, and the name of their book. And so Lynn, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Limara Colon, and I am from Puerto Rico, but I live in Northern Virginia, and the title of my book is Empower Our Girls.
Love it. Thank you. Sunil?
So I'm up here in Canada, in Toronto, just east of Toronto, in a suburb called Pickering. And the book that came out last year was called Math Recess, Playful Learning in an Age of Disruption. But I actually had one more book prior to that, which was called Pie of Life, kind of a spin on Life of Pi. So Pie of Life, The Hidden Happiness of Mathematics. So it wasn't a sequel, but it was kind of just, okay, let's be more playful in terms of talking about mathematics. And Tara Martin, who is here with us too, I just want to give a shout out. She actually did some of the nice visuals for the pull-out quotes from the book that were shared on social media.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to Tara in a minute because I got some things to say about her too. But next up on the panel is somebody that I have been so excited to have some conversations with because I love her work and following it online, and that is Naomi. Naomi, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Naomi O'Brien. I am currently in Orlando, Florida, and I just put out a book in September called Unpack Your Impact. And Tara was actually a part of that team that helped me make that happen as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Naomi. And of course, next on the list is Tara. I think everybody on this panel has had some kind of interaction with. She's like a connection to the stars. Like we all know who Tara is because she's all worked with us. But Tara, you also are an author and have a book too. Tell about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm excited. It feels like family. I'm like, oh, these are all my people. And I see Dave over in the comments too. So I'm Tara. I live in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas. So on the east side. And I have 2 books. So I have Be Real, Educate from the Heart. It's like part memoir, part embedding SEL in the work that we do every single day and not making it a separate piece. And my other book I'm super passionate about is my little picture book called Cannonball Inn. It's based off of a true story and it's all about taking risks and understanding with those risks, you have all kinds of things that come with that. So how to overcome those fears and take risks.
Awesome. And last, but definitely not least, we have a gentleman who not only is an author of himself, but he comes from parents that have quite a few books and are very well known in literacy circles. But Evan, tell everybody who you are.
Hey, thanks a lot, Todd. Really excited to be here. My name is Evan Robb. I'm a middle school principal from Northern Virginia and excited to be here tonight to talk about writing, one of my absolute favorite things to talk about. I'd like to highlight a couple books, Teen Makers with Dave Burgess Publishing that I wrote with my mother, Laura Robb, The 10-Minute Principle that I wrote last year for Corwin, and a book called Schools Full of Readers that my mother and I also wrote to hopefully promote cultures of reading in schools all across the country. So excited to be here.
I gotta say, I just find it so cool that you've been able to write with your mom. To me, that's gotta be such a neat experience. And I'm gonna ask about it in a little bit. But I do have to tell y'all, when I selected this panel, I didn't realize until after I created the graphic for this episode that we are all DVC authors for at least one of our books. So that was kind of a serendipitous moment. So I just to put that out there. But I'd love to kind of start start with, since this episode is about being an author, I'd love to know, what did you enjoy most about the writing process and releasing your book? Whether you want to talk about whether it was your first book, your most recent one, whatever it was, what did you enjoy most about writing it and releasing it? And Tara, we'll start with you, since you've got a picture book and a PD book.
Awesome. Well, I love writing. I'm kind of with Evan. That's just my passion. I've been a journaler every single day, and I go to writing for every like consoling myself. It's all in writing. So writing my books was so fun and so exciting. My first one was really challenging. I had a lot of personal experience in there, and Dave actually wrote my foreword. And he talks a little bit about this, that once the book was written, I didn't actually want to publish it. I just changed my mind. I was like, maybe this is just for me, and maybe it wasn't really meant to go out into the world. And he really challenged me to send it, slay that dragon is what he called it. And I did. And I'm so glad that I was able to share that message with the world. I feel like a lot of people are able to take bits and pieces of that and make their practice more applicable for the students that they serve. So I'm just really grateful. I also absolutely love that picture book. I could talk about writing forever, but I want to give everyone a spot. But that one, I think if you ever write something and you feel scared to send it, you definitely need to send that one, because I think that's the fear that comes upon us. But once you send it out into the world, you realize what a difference it can make in people's lives that read it and are able to apply it in their world.
Awesome. Well, Lynn, I'd love to hear from you, kind of your experience, because, you had your first book come out, I guess like a year, maybe 2 years ago. So what was that writing experience like, and then releasing your first book out into the world?
So it was an experience, and it was an experience because Spanish is my primary language. So for those of you that have read the book, and I have a co-author, Adam, welcome. It was very interesting because it was a very vulnerable story. It was my personal story, and I just pour myself into the book. But a lot of those stories, including I talk about my dad and my background in Puerto Rico, I remember living in Spanish. So putting the words in English, and just I compare it to having a baby. It is like having a baby. It just taught me so much about myself and the power of having a team that believes in you, and that can turn something so special and intimate into something beautiful that other people can use. So for me, it was a gift, because it taught me that I could go beyond what the narrative said, that, for people like me. So it was long, but I look at it now and say, wow, I did this. This girl from Puerto Rico did this. This is my American dream.
I love that. Well, Sunil, you wrote a fantastic, I love Math Recess. I became a math teacher because I hated math in school, and I wanted to make it different and prove that it could be fun. And I love that I've had many conversations with you about just the math and making it fun and making people understand that it doesn't have to be this scary beast. And so when you knew you were going to put books out there, did you always know, I want that math focused part of it? What was that experience like for you?
Just unmute myself. It's interesting you ask that question, because I'm going to answer it kind of in a different way. So I'm writing my third book, and the person that's actually the continuation of all three is Anthony Bourdain. I met Anthony Bourdain back in 2005, and it's been a journey for me to become, to write in his vein, to be a storyteller, and to be very unflinching, to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be humble. And if you follow his sort of career, in the beginning, it was all about him and the food. And so at the end, it became food became a conduit to meeting people. That was the vehicle, food became the vehicle to meet people. So for me in math recess, I was sure I wanted the math to be there, but I wanted the math to be a meeting place so I could have conversations like this. There's a great quote by this woman named Rachel Butzman, who basically predicted this collaborative consumption culture we're in 10 years ago. She said 25 years ago, we met people to do new business. Now we do business to meet new people. So everything is socialized. And, subconsciously, even a meeting like this on a sort of pop-up this week on a Thursday to meet all of you for the first time, that's my end game, right? That's my end game of why I write. And sort of, even though the math was there, my own purpose was about the socialization part.
I love that. I love that perspective too. And I hadn't thought about that, but what you said there made total sense. Well, Evan, you've also written several books, and you're also somebody on the panel that I haven't got to quite meet in person yet, even though we talk all the time. And so I love I love the leadership books that you've written, but I also love the literacy focus in things because that's such a passion of mine too. And so what was it like? Like, you've written different kinds of books and put them out there. So what's that been like for you, having that out there? And of course, writing with your mom.
It's actually been an interesting journey for me. As I found writing, I think the first thing for me was just trying to find my voice as a writer. Todd, I'm middle school principal, so the writing that I do day in and day out is not exactly that thrilling. It tends to be more kind of business, flat writing. So the journey of finding my voice and then really honing in on what I'm passionate about and using writing as a vehicle to share that. I kind of like the old saying that, everyone has a book to write because everyone can tell their story. And, so my story as I've grown up has focused on understanding leadership, my role as a leader and trying to share ideas with others, and also my love of literacy and reading, and encouraging kids to read more in schools all across America. Writing with my mother is exciting, initially intimidating, because she's written over 30 books, and I always say, a cloth that I can only admire. She is at a different level than I am, but she's been a really good teacher for me too, and has helped me develop as a writer.
I love that, and I'm sure it's a very special experience that you'll always have to know that you put that out there together. In addition to, because I guess it's kind of like her trusting you too. After all the books she's put out there, she's like, I guess I'll see what I can do with Evan too. Now, Evan, I gotta know, do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a sister.
Has she written with your mom yet?
She has not written a book with my mother. I think they've done some poetry work together, but they haven't written a book together.
I always wonder if there's like that jealousy, and they're like, well, he has his name on a book with mom, and I don't have that yet.
No, never that way with my sister. I've been lucky in that regard.
I love it. Well, Naomi, you recently released a new book, and I got to tell you, when your co-author Lanisha told me that y'all were going to be putting this out into the world, I was beyond excited, because I have followed both of you on social media for years, and the amount of personal growth that I've been able to experience by the powerful and vulnerable and honest work that you do. When I knew y'all were going to be putting some of that into a book, I got so excited knowing that more people were going to be able to be hopefully pushed outside of their comfort zone and grow and learn too. And so I know it's just like Lynn, it's y'all's first book. It's your book baby, and it just came out. So I'm sure you're still feeling the effects of, oh my gosh, my work is out there for people to read anywhere. And so what's that experience been like for you?
Yes, it's been really exciting, and the process was scary because we, like Lanisha Tab and I, had been doing this work for years, and we thought it was great, and we would just have each other to talk to about it because we were just kind of piloting this new thing in our classrooms, and we're like, we need to tell other people about this. And she was the one years ago that was like, we need to write this down, and we're writing a book. And I'm like, no, we're not. Nobody wants to read this. Just that stuff we're figuring out in our classrooms. And she's like, no, we're going to write this book. So putting it out there was really scary because it's what we've been doing that we're like, well, we think it's a good idea. What if nobody else thinks it's a good idea? And it's also kind of a call out to elementary school teachers. So we're like, well, what if people are just super offended and they don't take it as like inspiration? They just take it as insulting. But it's been received really well. Like, we're still, like, it's new, so we're still getting tagged in things. We're still getting DMs and messages and seeing how it has been transforming teachers' lives. So far it's working the way we intended. We're like, what if it's just backfires and everyone hates us and thinks that we're judging them? And we're like, no, that's not what our intention was. So it's been cool, but exciting to see it play out.
Yeah. I'm so excited for you because I know it just came out. So as it continues to grow and morph and everything, I know you're going to have other exciting moments along the process. But, when it comes to all of us, we all, I'm sure, have a little bit different process when it comes to writing. Some of us, like for me, I'm a total, give me a Google Doc. And whenever I have some inspiration, I'll put it in there and organize it later. But some of my co-authors, like one of my co-authors for Sparks in the Dark, Travis Crowder, he was like, no, I've got to write it all down on paper because I'm a hand writer, and then I'll transfer it over eventually into some technology. And so when it comes to your writing process, about how you get your thoughts out there and organize, what was it like for you? Evan, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. So I'm an outline writer. And, I went through times when I was trying to kind of figure out the best way for me to write, where I was looking for more inspiration to write, and was finding I wasn't having a lot of inspiration sometimes. But for me, if I outline what I want to create, so chapter by chapter, and build an outline, I find I can be a lot more disciplined with my writing. I like to write every day. So I'll say at least for an hour or so, or an hour and a half each day. And I work off the outline. So if I'm not feeling as particularly inspired one particular day, I can still rely on the outline to kind of formulate my thinking and guide me.
I love that. See, I'm not an outline guy. I've tried it. And so I say bravo to you, because there's little things that people do. Like, to me, that's such an organized way to do it. And I'm such a not organized brain that I get so jealous of people like you, Evan, who can do that. Because I'm like, that's the kind of writer I want to be. I'm just not, I just don't get myself in line enough to make that happen.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes it sounds a little boring when I talk about writing off of an outline. So thank you for your kind words.
Hey, it led to a great book. That's all that matters.
There you go.
And so, Lynn, what about you? What was your writing process like?
So, I use the Miracle Morning. I practice the Miracle Morning every day, and I found the Miracle Morning for writers. And it helped me build time in the morning because I have twins. So it was busy. It's still busy at the Cologne's house. So I knew that I had a date with myself, and that I was working towards a goal. Now, another thing that I do is I carry a little notebook in my purse and bag. And when I have thoughts, or someone says something that reminds me of a connection with what I'm writing, I'll just jot it down. So if I lose that notebook, that's worth gold, because it has a lot of wisdom there. But the mornings for me work great. I just love it because it's quiet, and I know that that's the time for me to write. And I have continued the practice. I've added dissertation.
That's not as
now.
fun to write, though.
So, not as magical, but
well, I love that you shared having that little journal to write in, and just whenever a thought came to you, because whenever Dave and I had started talking before my first book, and I was like, Dave, I don't even know where to begin. Like, I don't even know what to do. He's like, whenever something comes to you, just write it down. Just keep a document, keep a journal, keep something, just write everything down, and then pull from stuff at any other time. And that was some of the best advice I got, because then I didn't have to stress so much about, I don't know where to put this right now. Well, I didn't have to worry about that. It was just about putting stuff out there. What about you, Naomi? What was kind of your process?
So I'm like you, Todd. I'm not organized, and I'm just, whatever's in my head, I'm just gonna get it out. But lucky for me, Lanisha is super organized. We did this work style personality test, and I am a North, which is jump right in, don't plan things out, you'll figure it out later. And she is very detail oriented. So it works because I motivate her to get going when she gets so bogged down with details, but she keeps me on track when I'm all over the place. And she had actually done some work with Brené Brown last summer. And Brené Brown shared with her this process called a paint down. I don't know if that's a universal thing, but it was called a paint down, and how you organize your work. So Manisha's like, we have to do a paint down for our book. And we planned out the chapters, or she did. She made a Google Doc, she named the chapters, and it was like, what's going to go in each chapter? And if it's not doesn't fit here, we're not putting it in. We can't just throw in random stories that don't fit, which is something that I would do. So then we organized it like that, and we had 8 chapters, and it was like, okay, you pick 4 and I'll pick 4. Like, what's the 4 that you're most excited about? So I just started writing. I was also pregnant at the time. So I was trying to finish the book before I gave birth because
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to be so busy with this newborn baby. Like, we had a February deadline from Dave, but I was like, I need to finish this by October because I'm going to have a baby on Halloween. So anytime I had time to write, I was just writing. I can see myself like doing text to talk or talk to text, like write this idea down, like, and then add it to the Google Doc. And then, so we each wrote 4 chapters, but then we switched chapters and we went into each other's chapters and we were able to add, or, we would talk to each other. Is it okay if I change this and things like that? And we did that so many times, like each chapter really became the voice of one. And then with the whole editing team, like they helped us slim that down too. But it was just like me throwing ideas out there and then her reading over it and kind of reeling me back in or being like, this doesn't make sense. Let's put this in this chapter and things like that. So it just worked out that she's so organized because I'm certainly not.
I love it. Well, there were 2 things you said there. First of all, I agree with you. God bless the editors because they make all of us look way better. The editors are amazing. But, hearing you describe you and Lanicia's relationship so reminds me working with Adam DeVico on When Kids Lead because he's so like Lanicia. He's like, no, we need a plan. Here's what we're going to do. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, no, tighten this up. Where are we going to do this? And I'm like, I'm just putting stuff in there. And so I could totally relate to that, Naomi. Well, Sunil, what about you? What was your process like?
Well, I mean, the process is still sort of evolving as I'm writing my 3rd book, but it's a combination. Maybe it's a Gemini in me. It's a combination of disheveled, unconventional ideas and sort of conventional ideas. And let me go to the conventional part. I don't like to write necessarily in chronological order. What I like to do as a goal is to write the opening 2 or 3 paragraphs of every chapter as I would think it's going to appear in the book. Of course, it's going to get changed in subsequent drafts, but I need a foundation. And the foundation becomes like, now it becomes inspirational sparks because I have all these foundational pieces written for each chapter. So, and, a lot of my inspiration sometimes comes at night. So 1 or 2 words which come to me like, in that sort of deep kind of after REM sleep, they might mean nothing if it came to me in the afternoon, but at night, I had to write that word down and I'll remember all the kind of sort of tentacles which come out of it. So it's kind of this sort of almost ineffable stuff that's hard to explain, but the foundational piece of having every chapter written in the beginning in terms of the opening chapters, definitely get the introduction down, like write the introduction first, write an entire first chapter down so you get in the habit of writing a whole chapter. I have, maybe again, going because of Gemini, I have the opposite. I don't have writer's block. I have the exact opposite problem. It's always dripping, okay? I can never cut it off. So what that means also, it doesn't mean I'm writing all the time. It means that all these ideas come and I will only write if I'm inspired. So even if I've got all these ideas, Google Docs, if I'm sitting there and it's not hitting me, I'll walk up. I'll just walk away. It doesn't mean I cannot write. It's not writer's block, but I don't have the kind of, and just listening to our conversation, we don't write like this, right? But the most effective way to communicate with someone is through the voice modulation, inflection. And I try to write as much to that style. Like, how do I want to hear myself in text? So it's a process. It started with the first book. You learn all these things. You learn about who you are and, how you write. And so that's the way I write.
I love that. And, I love the idea of just getting a couple paragraphs, the first couple paragraphs done for each chapter. That's I'd never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense too, to do something like that.
And it didn't come to me in the beginning. Like, it's just something now has come. It's like, so I have a picture in mind. If I go to the gym and I'm thinking about chapter 7 of a book, it's like, hey, what am I going to write? I know what I've written for those opening paragraphs. They're very detailed and words might come, sentences, who knows, but it just kind of calms me going, I've written the book. Like, I haven't written the book, but I've written the book.
Yeah. I love that. And I see Dave's over in the comments and he said, it's so interesting. I wrote my intro last and I did the same thing. Like I had the book and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to do the intro. So I love like what Dave said, that hearing all these different things, like I'm hearing stuff from each of you going, ooh, I want to try that if I ever get to try to write something again because I'm still worn out from the other experiences. But anyway, Tara, what about you? What's your process like?
I was going to say the same as Dave and opposite of Sunil. Like I always write. I kind of like Evan, I kind of like an outline, but really not an outline. I just knew my acronyms. So for Be Real, it was, Dave likes to call these buckets, but it's just like Google Docs for each of the acronyms. And I'm opposite. I like to write the details first. And then I like to come in with a strong intro and summary. So I like to save that for last on the book and also on the chapters. I'm a little bit backward on that part. But I also do kind of what Lynn was saying. She has a notebook. I used a voice memo on my phone and I commuted a lot to work. I was working in another city. So during the writing process of Be Real, I would often like voice message myself parts and pieces that go in different places and then come back and transcribe them. But one of the things I found very helpful with writing both books, Cannonball Inn and Be Real, was getting a very clear picture of what my big idea was for that book. What did I want the readers to walk away being able to take away? I knew exactly what my big idea was, what my promise to those readers was. And I'm kind of like Sunil in the way that I have so many ideas. And so if the idea didn't run through that line, that thread right through the middle of my book, then I just had to put it in a separate bucket, which was called extras. And I literally had 80 pages, Google Docs, of extras that never made it to the book. They probably won't even make it to a blog. But I just I had all these ideas and I wanted to develop them anyway. So I spent a ridiculous amount of hours writing stuff that I didn't actually need. But I thought, well, maybe if I write another book, I might use that stuff. But so if you're out there and you want to write, the best idea is just to get it down, whatever that process is for you. Get it down. Every single one of us do something a little bit different and find what works for you. For me, sitting with alpha waves. I don't know if you've ever listened to alpha waves, but it's not music. It's not, it's sounds that we don't get enough of. I would just put those in and I could focus for 2 hours and I would just write down everything that fit in the line because I could always think of stuff to write, but that was streamlined and put it in those buckets. And then that's kind of how I just started later shaping my book and then building those intros and outros to the chapters.
I just love that there are 6 of us on this conversation today and all of us do it different.
Yeah.
But we all ended up with a book in the end that we were proud of. But that's always so interesting to me. And that's what I love about these conversations is it's that reminder that you don't have to do it the same way as everybody else. Do what works for you. Write about what you love and what you're passionate about. And that's what will come out in the end. And so as we begin to wrap this up, my final question for you is I'd love to know what was the most difficult part of the book process for you? I mean, there's what a lot of people don't know is they see a book come out and they're like, oh, well, that must have been a breeze. I was like, no, there's a lot of different steps that go out to putting a book. Like for me, being real, because I'm very anal about some things, the most difficult part of the process for me, for multiple books, has been cover design. Because I'm so much of a visual guy that I know when we designed Kids Deserve It, that designer probably hated me because I think we did like 50 different variations because I was like, I need that a centimeter up. I need this turn just a little bit more. I was like, can you just call me? I need paintbrush things. That's what I want. And I'm like, I feel so bad, but then I'm like, I don't want a cover out there that I have to live with the rest of my life. And so I know that has nothing to do with actually writing the book. But for me, that's always the hardest part, especially if I don't have a vision for the cover yet, but it's already time to design it. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know where to begin. So I'd love to start with you, Evan. What did you find as the most difficult part?
Actually, before I do that, I just want to make one comment for anyone that's viewing, because this is just it's interesting for me. I have never really talked with anyone about how they write. And I've written 4 books. I just kind of know how I do it, which is pretty similar to the way that my mother does it. So this has been really helpful for me just to hear, that we all got to the same place, but everyone went about it a little bit differently. So I guess the question, the hardest part for me, a lot. Yep. Let's see, I got a big list. I think the hardest part for me as a writer is avoiding repetition. Because what happens is, I write a lot, I produce a lot of Google Docs or Microsoft Word, and sometimes I may forget that I kind of talked about something, in the beginning chapters, and I seem to revisit it in other chapters, and it shouldn't be there. And a good editor will help out with that. So something I need to always continue to work on. The other part for me that's a little challenging is I tend to rewrite a lot. And at some point, you just have to commit to something. You do. Otherwise, you just keep redrafting all the time. But I have learned, it's important. It's actually interesting as a principal, because a lot of times, especially middle school kids, they don't like to rewrite a lot. They like to start their paper and finish their paper. But I have learned the importance of drafting and rewriting, ultimately making a commitment, though. But I enjoy also being able to share that with kids that I work with.
I love that. Tara, what did you find was the most difficult part for you?
Probably the most challenging part for me would be my picture book. My favorite project on all the, and out of every project I've ever done in my life, that's probably the one I'm most proud of anyway. But the most challenging part was I had just too many words. So it was 1,000 words when I wrote it down, the idea. And when I visited with some very amazing picture book writers out there, and they gave me advice, one of the things they told me is, the pictures and the words must tell the story together. If one could tell the story without the other, it's not a picture book, it's just a blog. And so it helped me to think about paring my words down. And what I had to do was, I love storytelling. So where like the tear is dripping from her eye, I had to highlight all the words that I needed to remove from the text and have my illustrator, Jen, illustrate those words. So the picture told that piece of the story, and I could pull it out so we could get our words down to 500 to 600 words, which is what a picture book kind of standardized kind of needs to be. And that was so challenging, but it was also so rewarding, because watching children read the book now, and they're looking at the picture and they're reading the words, and they're looking at the picture and they're reading words, they're gaining all that meaning from both of it, working together. It's just so powerful. So I'm glad that I went through it, but it was definitely the most challenging part. And she is in Ireland, so our time difference was crazy too. Yeah. Every morning getting up and, no, not that, like we need to do this, like back and forth. But it turned out to be, like I said, the most rewarding project I've ever created so far. And I'm just super grateful for it, but that was very challenging.
I love that. And I will say, working with an illustrator for mine too that lived in Indonesia, it was because it was like I'd have to wait till I got up the next morning for edits, and then I have to wait like 6 hours before they'll read my comments on the edits. So it's so funny you shared that too. Well, what about you, Naomi?
Okay. I agree with you, Todd. The cover killed us. And I think Lanisha even reached out to you and Adam, and she was like, don't worry, like they had a lot of like back and forth too, like be picky. And it's like we didn't know what we wanted exactly, but we knew what we didn't want when we saw it. So like we're like, we'll know it when we see it, we'll know it when we see it. And luckily our guy was very patient, because like same thing, I was like, I'm sure he hates us, and he's like telling his friends how horrible we are. So that was really difficult. And then also making sure we were very clear with our language, because we're like, well, we know what we mean when we say this phrase or when we say it like this, but will someone else pick it up in a different way that doesn't know us? So we read through it. We're like, okay, I'm reading through it with this lens on now. Now I'm reading it with the first year teacher lens. I'm reading it, with this, like we even said, like we're reading it with a hater lens. Like what could a hater say about the book? And like, could they misconstrue this sentence and make it seem like it's something that we didn't intend for it to be? So making sure that it really reflected what we wanted it to say was a process as well.
Yeah, I can imagine just making sure, because you want to be proud of your book and you want to stand behind it, and you don't want it to be offensive. So you have to kind of look at those different lenses to best prepare yourself. So I love that you shared that too. And yes, you got to be proud of that cover. So if it takes 1,000 redos, you do 1,000 redos. Yeah. Because you love the cover now, and and it led you to that. So there you go. Well,
real quick, Todd, I just want to type in. like, I believe that 100%. And I think I told Naomi this too. Like, you have to marry that cover. And like Lynn said earlier, it's like having a baby. Like, you will be with this for the rest of your life. So you might as well love it. Even if we have to do 1,000 iterations of it, it's fine. I always tell authors that. So love your cover. You got to love it.
Yep. Sunil, what about you? You're muted.
That's never happened before. So the question was, and there's a reason why I'm reiterating your question. You asked, what was the most difficult part, right? Now, usually when you ask somebody that, I mean, it's kind of like the negative connotation, or like what was the most challenging, worst part. But for me, the most difficult part was the editing process. But I also loved it. Because if it's not difficult, it's not going to be a good book.
Yep.
Like, that's the bottom line. Like, I don't want to, if my book went through, like, everyone goes, check, 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 that's all good. I'm going to go, really? There's nothing I can improve upon? And it's the right amount of butting heads, communication, and it's difficult as all get out, but it's such a learning opportunity in terms of what needs to be conveyed in terms of your clarity of writing or clarity of thought. So yeah, it was really difficult, but I loved it. And I just want to share a similar idea about how we take some phrases and we think they're like, so right now I'm going to incorporate this idea of being lost as a positive thing, especially in math, because we're not lost anymore. Like, there's a wonderful blog written by this woman called The Beauty of Being Lost. We have GPS systems, we all that. We don't like to be lost anymore. And so the idea of being lost to me is such a positive thing in math, and same thing, encountering difficulty. These are positive. These are things which are the historical thematic narrative of mathematics. Mathematics, the history about it is about slow failure. In school, we teach fast success. Why do you think we failed at math education? For that reason. It's a completely wrong narrative. So just sort of that was me ranting a bit, but just the idea, the most difficult part is the most rewarding part, which is the editorial process.
I totally agree with you. And it reminds me of something that Naomi said a minute ago too, is I loved working with the editor because they would take so many ideas, and the editor that did mine and Adam DeVico's last book, When Kids Lead, was not an educator. And so he would come back and go, I don't know what this means. Like, you're talking very much as an educator. And so if anybody else picks up this book, they're not going to know what this means. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we do need to rethink about that. Or he might say, you know what you're talking about, but you left out a lot of details here. Like, you need to go in deeper with this. And you're right. It was one of those that's like, oh, yeah, okay, thank you. Like, I want that of somebody making my writing better, because I know that my stuff is not amazing when it comes out, but that editor helps get it better. And so I love that you shared that, Sunil. What about you, Lynn?
So you know what was the most challenging part? Getting started, because I think for me, the narrative was, can you really do this? Are you good enough to do this? And I think that, like many people, we all have a book that we can write. So that first step, and Dave and Shelley made it so easy because they just listened to the story and said, yes, this can be a book. And I think I cried for over a month. And then when it got released, I cried even more. But it's because it meant so much. And the narrative that I heard, and it's that imposter syndrome, was so loud that it kept me from writing the book earlier. So once I got over that, it was just living the dream and really enjoying the journey, which there were great people alongside helping me and Adam, but it was just getting started and believing that I was worth enough to write a book.
And that is the perfect way to end this conversation, is when you shared in there that all of us have a story within us to write, to get out there. And so I love this. I have so enjoyed this conversation with you five tonight and learning more about your process and your story. And so thank you for coming and being a guest on Honestly Let's Talk. And thank you everybody for listening or watching another episode. Remember, you can join these live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central on Facebook or YouTube. And you can check out all the recordings on Spotify, Apple, everywhere. It's everywhere. So thank you, Five, so much for the amazing work you're doing. If you're listening or watching, getting all of these books will greatly improve you because they're all fantastic and they all cover a variety of things that we could all grow and be better in. So thank you guys so much.